My name is Daniel Whitaker, and I'm 35 years old. I grew up in a small town in Vermont where everyone knows everyone else's business, and your reputation is worth more than the dollars in your wallet. For years, I trusted two people above all others: my cousin Michael Turner, who was raised alongside me like a brother, and Pastor Samuel Green, our spiritual guide and a pillar of our family's faith. My life seemed to have reached its peak when I got engaged to Catherine Miller in March 2021. I believed that with the woman I loved, the cousin I admired, and the faith that guided me, I had everything a man could want. What I didn't know was that the loyalty, honesty, and faith I valued so much were nothing more than facades hiding greed and cowardice. I'm a man who seeks peace, but I have my limits. My calm demeanor would be mistaken for naivety. That was their first mistake. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. My world came crashing down in early October 2021 when I discovered an unimaginable truth. Catherine was pregnant, and the child wasn't mine. It was Michael's. But that wasn't even the worst part. Pastor Green, the man of faith I'd respected since childhood, had helped cover up the betrayal to protect the family's image and the congregation's reputation. The betrayal ran even deeper than I initially thought. Catherine hadn't just cheated on me in a moment of weakness. In secret, with Michael's support and under Pastor Green's guidance, she had taken a non-invasive prenatal paternity test that confirmed Michael was the father. They had known for weeks but decided to keep me in the dark so I would accept paternity. Catherine wanted to give her child the stable life she knew I could provide, knowing full well that Michael was an irresponsible man who would never support the child financially. I felt the sharp pain of betrayal cut through me like a knife, but I refused to react with anger. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. In silence, I began to architect my revenge, gathering irrefutable evidence that would expose their lies. Catherine Miller, my fiancée, had sold her soul for convenience and a calculated plan. Michael Turner, my cousin, was a false brother who had used my trust to betray me in the worst possible way. And Pastor Green was a false religious leader who had betrayed his faith and his congregation's trust to hide a dirty secret that could destroy reputations. They had no excuses. Greed, cowardice, and fear of scandal were the only reasons behind their despicable actions. But they had made one fatal error. They underestimated me. I started noticing that Michael and Catherine behaved strangely in my presence during late August and September 2021. There were awkward silences, meaningful glances they thought I didn't catch, and Pastor Green was always nearby during family gatherings, as if trying to manage a delicate situation. There was a tension in the air that I couldn't explain at first, but my intuition told me something was terribly wrong. My discovery came by pure chance on October 5, 2021. I had left the house but returned to grab my wallet, which I'd forgotten on the kitchen counter. That's when I heard Catherine talking on the phone in our bedroom, her voice carrying down the hallway. She was confirming that the prenatal test results showed Michael was the father, and mentioning how they needed to stick to the plan until after the wedding. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes, but those words shattered my entire world. Instead of confronting them immediately, I pretended nothing had happened. Confused and hurt, I left the house and spent hours driving around the back roads of Vermont, past the changing maple trees and historic covered bridges, trying to process what I'd heard. Once the initial shock wore off, I knew I had to investigate further. Over the following days, I carefully went through Catherine's phone when she was in the shower and found text message threads between her and Michael dating back to February 2021. I discovered emails where Pastor Green had been advising them both to protect the family's reputation and keep the secret for everyone's good. I began systematically documenting everything. I didn't need a lawyer for my revenge. The truth would be my weapon, and timing would be everything. The betrayal wasn't an act of passion. It was a calculated conspiracy designed to steal my happiness and my future. They believed that once we were married and the child was born, I would accept paternity out of love for Catherine and my commitment to our vows. They had underestimated my intelligence and my resolve. Catherine's betrayal with Michael was grave enough, but the fact that Pastor Green, the man my family had respected for over 2 decades, not only knew but actively encouraged the deception made it infinitely worse. This wasn't just adultery, this was fraud, emotional manipulation, and a complete violation of everything I believed in. Their plan seemed airtight on paper, but they had made a crucial error. They underestimated my ability to uncover the truth and my willingness to act on it. For weeks during October and November 2021, I played the role of the devoted fiancé while secretly building my case. I installed a small digital recorder in our living room, perfectly legal in Vermont since it was my own home and a one-party consent state. I documented every conversation, every lie, every moment they thought they were safe. The evidence I gathered was damning. Text messages between Catherine and Michael dating back to February 2021, discussing their affair and making jokes about how Daniel is so trusting, he'll never suspect anything. Email exchanges with Pastor Green where he advised them on managing the delicate situation and protecting our Christian community's reputation. I even captured audio of Pastor Green telling Catherine during one of his counseling visits, "Sometimes God asks us to bear difficult burdens for the greater good of His people. Your silence protects not just your family, but our entire congregation." What made their betrayal even more calculated was the financial research Catherine had conducted. I found her browser history showing searches for my exact salary at the Vermont Department of Transportation, my Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont insurance coverage details, and even my credit score through unauthorized soft pulls. She knew I earned $75,000 annually as a civil engineer, enough to provide comfortably for a child. Michael, meanwhile, was working part-time at a hardware store in Burlington, making barely $15 an hour, and had accumulated over $11,000 in credit card debt. They had turned my love into a business transaction, and I was about to show them the cost of their greed. December arrived with Vermont's first heavy snowfall, and our small town of Shelburne was preparing for the annual Christmas Eve service at Shelburne Community Baptist Church. Pastor Green had announced that this year's service would be especially meaningful, a celebration of family, faith, and new beginnings. He had no idea how prophetic those words would become. I spent 3 weeks in December 2021 preparing my presentation. Using my work laptop and a portable projector I borrowed from the transportation department, I created a comprehensive slideshow that would expose everything. Screenshots of text messages, printed email conversations, audio files with clear transcripts. I had everything organized chronologically to tell the complete story. My engineering background served me well in presenting complex information in a clear, systematic way. Catherine noticed I seemed distant during those weeks, but when she asked, I simply told her I was stressed about year-end project deadlines. "Don't worry, honey," she would say, placing my hand on her growing belly. "Everything will be perfect once our baby arrives in the spring." The irony of her words made my stomach turn, but I maintained perfect composure. Michael had been acting increasingly nervous since Thanksgiving. He avoided direct eye contact during family gatherings and made excuses to leave early. When my uncle asked him about his plans for 2022, Michael mumbled something about maybe looking for work down south. He was already planning his escape route. Pastor Green continued his weekly premarital counseling visits to our home throughout December. During one particularly hypocritical session just 2 weeks before Christmas, he spent an hour discussing the sacred trust between husband and wife and building marriage on the foundation of complete honesty. As he spoke, I watched Catherine nod earnestly while Michael sat in our kitchen, pretending to read a magazine but clearly listening to every word. The sheer audacity of it was almost too much to bear, but I remained silent, mentally cataloging every detail for my presentation. The night before Christmas Eve 2021, I lay awake in bed, going through my plan one final time. Catherine slept peacefully beside me, one hand resting on her belly, completely unaware that in less than 18 hours, her carefully constructed world would collapse. I had checked and rechecked everything multiple times, The projector was loaded and tested, the audio files were crystal clear, and I had printed backup copies of every piece of evidence in case of technical problems. At 5:30 in the morning on December 24th, I got up quietly and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Catherine found me there at 7, already dressed in my best navy suit and tie. "You're up early for Christmas Eve," she said, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "Are you excited about tonight? Pastor Green says this service will be the most beautiful one yet." "Yes," I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. "I think tonight will be very memorable for everyone." The irony wasn't lost on me that they had chosen Christmas Eve, a night meant to celebrate the arrival of truth into a dark world, for their web of lies to finally be exposed to the light. By 4:30 p.m., Shelburne Community Baptist Church was packed beyond capacity. The entire congregation of nearly 180 people had gathered for the special service, with some standing in the back. Red poinsettias lined the altar, white candles flickered on every windowsill, and the scent of fresh pine from the Christmas tree filled the sanctuary. My parents sat in the third row, beaming with pride at their son and his pregnant fiancée. Catherine's parents had driven up from Rutland that morning, and even her elderly grandmother had made the trip, sitting in her wheelchair in the front section reserved for family. Michael arrived 20 minutes late, as usual, slipping into a back pew just as the opening hymn, "O Come All Ye Faithful," was ending. I noticed his hands trembling as he held the hymnal, and sweat on his forehead despite the December cold. Pastor Green stood at the podium in his finest ceremonial robes, his voice booming with false confidence as he spoke about God's greatest blessings and the miracle of new life entering our church family. "Tonight," Pastor Green announced, gesturing broadly to the congregation, "we celebrate not just the birth of our Lord and Savior, but the new beginnings He continues to bless us with. Our dear brother Daniel Whitaker has asked to share some thoughts about faith, family, and God's providence in his life." He smiled warmly in my direction. "Daniel, would you please come forward and share your heart with us?" I had contacted him 4 days earlier, requesting time to speak about God's blessings in my life and the lessons He's taught me about trust and truth. Pastor Green had eagerly agreed, assuming I wanted to publicly thank him for his spiritual guidance during our engagement. As I walked down the center aisle toward the front of the church, I could feel nearly 200 pairs of eyes following me. Catherine squeezed my hand as I passed her pew, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, honey. I love you so much." Her words felt like shards of glass in my chest, but I maintained complete composure. I connected my laptop to the church's projection system, the same equipment they used for displaying hymn lyrics during Sunday services. Behind me, the large screen showed a simple title slide with elegant typography: Truth, Faith, and Family, a personal testament by Daniel Whitaker. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady and carrying clearly through the sanctuary. "Thank you, Pastor Green, for this opportunity to speak on such a holy night. Thank you all for being here to share in this moment. Tonight I want to tell you a story about trust, about the people we choose to love, and about the true cost of deception." I could see Catherine shifting uncomfortably in her seat, a puzzled expression beginning to form on her face. Michael had gone visibly pale and was gripping the pew in front of him. "My name is Daniel Whitaker, and for 35 years I've tried to live by the Christian values this church taught me: honesty, loyalty, and faith in both God and the people closest to me. I believed that those I loved most shared these same values." I clicked to the next slide, which displayed a family photo from Thanksgiving 2020, showing Catherine, Michael, and me with our arms around each other, all smiling. But sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. The church had fallen completely silent now. Even the small children had stopped fidgeting. I could hear the old heating system cycling on, and the soft whisper of snow against the stained glass windows. 2 months ago, I discovered that my fiancée, Catherine Miller, was pregnant. We were overjoyed, or at least I was. What I didn't know then was that the child she's carrying isn't mine. I paused, letting the words settle over the congregation like a physical weight. The father of this child is my cousin, Michael Turner, the man I've loved like a brother my entire life. A collective gasp echoed through the sanctuary, followed immediately by shocked murmurs. Catherine's face had drained of all color, and she was gripping the wooden pew in front of her so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her mother let out a small cry of disbelief. "These aren't accusations based on suspicion," I continued, clicking to the next slide, which displayed a text message exchange between Catherine and Michael, with their names clearly visible. "These are facts, confirmed by evidence. Text messages sent just 10 days ago discussing how to maintain their secret until after our wedding in February." Michael suddenly stood up, knocking his hymnal to the floor with a loud thud. "Daniel, stop this," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "You're making a terrible mistake. Please don't do this." "Am I making a mistake, Michael?" I asked calmly, maintaining eye contact with him across the sanctuary. I clicked again, and an audio file began playing through the church's sound system. Catherine's voice filled the church, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. The prenatal test came back. "It's definitely Michael's baby. But Daniel doesn't know, and we need to stick to our plan. Once we're married, it'll be too late for him to back out even if he finds out later." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Catherine's mother screamed and fell back against her husband. My father jumped to his feet, his face flushed red with rage, shouting, "How could you do this to my son?" Several congregation members began talking loudly at once, their voices mixing with gasps of shock and angry exclamations. Someone in the back was crying loudly, but I wasn't finished. Above the chaos, I raised my voice and continued with perfect calm. "There's more you need to know. This betrayal wasn't just between two people. It was a conspiracy that involved someone you all trust with your spiritual lives." Pastor Green, who had been standing frozen beside the altar, suddenly stepped forward with his hands raised. "Daniel, please," he said, his voice strained and desperate. "This isn't the appropriate time or place for..." "For what, Pastor Green? For truth?" I clicked to the next slide, which displayed an email thread between Pastor Green and Catherine, complete with dates and timestamps. For the past 4 months, Pastor Samuel Green has not only known about this affair and deception, but he has actively participated in covering it up. The church fell silent again. But this was a different kind of silence, the terrible quiet that comes before a storm. Pastor Green's face went ashen as his own written words appeared on the screen in enlarged font. "Catherine, we must protect your family's reputation and our church's standing in the community. Daniel is a godly man who will provide well for this child. Sometimes the Lord asks us to bear difficult secrets for the greater good. Your marriage will give this child a stable Christian home, which is God's will." Pastor Green didn't just advise them to keep their secret, I continued, my voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. He actively helped them plan the deception. He counseled Catherine to wait until after our wedding to ensure I would be legally obligated to support a child that isn't mine. Mrs. Henderson, who had served as the church organist for 38 years, slowly stood up and pointed a shaking finger at Pastor Green. "Samuel Green," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "How could you? How could you betray this young man's trust? How could you betray all of us who put our faith in you?" Catherine was sobbing now, her hands covering her face, her whole body shaking. "Daniel, please let me explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain what, Catherine? Explain how you researched my salary, my insurance benefits, my credit score, all without my knowledge or consent? Explain how you calculated that I could provide a better life for Michael's child than he could?" I clicked to another slide showing her internet search history, which I had recovered from our shared home computer. "Explain how you researched Vermont divorce laws and paternity fraud consequences just last week, planning for the possibility that I might discover the truth after we were married." Michael had tried to push his way toward a side exit, but several men from the congregation, including my father and my uncle James, had moved to block the doors. "You're not going anywhere, you coward," my father said, his voice filled with a fury I had never heard before. "You're going to face what you've done." I clicked to my final slide, which was elegantly simple. A formal statement announcing the cancellation of our wedding, my resignation from all church positions, and noticed that I had already consulted with attorney Robert Walsh in Montpellier regarding potential fraud and conspiracy charges. The wedding scheduled for February 14, 2022 is permanently canceled, I announced to the silent congregation. Catherine Miller and Michael Turner are no longer welcome in my home, in my life, or in my family. As for Pastor Samuel Green, I'll leave his fate to this congregation and to the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which I contacted this morning. The aftermath was swift and devastating. Within minutes, the church erupted into dozens of angry confrontations happening simultaneously. Catherine's parents rushed to her side, but even they seemed more horrified than supportive. "How could you bring this shame on our family?" her father demanded, his voice carrying over the chaos. "How could you disgrace the Miller name like this?" Michael finally broke free from the crowd blocking the exits and ran toward the main doors, but not before turning around and shouting desperately, "I never wanted any of this. She came to me. She pursued me." His public act of cowardice was the final nail in his coffin, drawing angry shouts and boos from the congregation. Pastor Green attempted to address the crowd, stepping up to his microphone, but was immediately shouted down by dozens of voices demanding his immediate resignation. Deacon Williams, who had faithfully served the church for 29 years, took charge of the situation and announced that an emergency board meeting would be held the following morning to address Pastor Green's future with the church. I packed up my laptop and projector with deliberate calm, ignoring the chaos erupting around me. As I walked toward the exit, carrying my equipment, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was my mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so proud of you, son," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "You handled this with more grace and dignity than any of them deserved." The consequences of that Christmas Eve revelation were swift and far-reaching. Pastor Green submitted his resignation in disgrace on December 27th, and within a week, the story had spread throughout Vermont's interconnected religious community. Catherine moved back in with her parents in Rutland before New Year's Day, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that she struggled to find both prenatal care and employment, because word of the scandal had reached medical offices and potential employers throughout central Vermont. Michael simply vanished. Some people claimed he moved to Boston. Others heard he went to California or Florida. Honestly, I didn't care enough to find out where he ended up. As for me, I discovered that exposing the truth had set me free in ways I never could have imagined. 18 months later, in June 2023, I met Sarah, a nurse practitioner who worked at the University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington. A mutual friend had introduced us at a coffee shop, mentioning that she had heard about my situation through the Vermont healthcare community. "I know what you've been through," she told me during our first conversation, "and I think it says everything about your character that you chose truth and justice over comfortable lies." We were married this past August in a simple but beautiful ceremony at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Montpellier, surrounded by the friends and family members who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life. I learned that true revenge isn't about inflicting pain. It's about revealing truth and allowing justice to take its natural course. Catherine, Michael, and Pastor Green destroyed themselves with their own lies, greed, and moral cowardice. All I did was give truth a voice and let the consequences unfold as they naturally would. Today, Sarah and I live in a different Vermont town where we're building our own family based on genuine love, trust, and honesty. Occasionally, people recognize my name and remember the Christmas Eve scandal that rocked Shelburne's religious community, but most simply see a man who refused to be a victim and chose dignity over vengeance. The last I heard, Catherine was working as a cashier at a Shaw's supermarket in Rutland, still unmarried and raising her son alone. Michael never contacted her again and has never provided any financial or emotional support for his child. Pastor Green relocated to Tampa, Florida, where he works at a Home Depot and attends a small church where nobody knows about his disgraceful past. Their punishment wasn't my anger or my hatred. It was simply the natural consequence of the choices they made. The truth, as they say in Vermont, has a way of rising to the surface like cream, no matter how deep you try to bury it. If you enjoyed this story of truth triumphing over deception, please like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get alerts when new stories like this one are posted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.